drum and percussion instructor for like 6 years. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Something like that, 5, 6 years. And Steve is a great mentor of young people, and he's an amazing artist. And recently he has entered the realm of digital art, which I thought was kind of exciting because it's kind of new, something I've never tried to think about before. So I'll turn the floor over to him and take it away.
Welcome everybody, and thank you so much to Skip and to Rachel for having me today. I truly appreciate being here and to have the opportunity to speak to everyone. I think people that basically know me, as Skip was mentioning, think of me first as a jazz musician, a vibraphonist, which is the instrument that I'm known for playing. They think of me as a music educator, as a composer, a pianist, a percussionist, which is certainly who I am, and I've been doing this as a musician. I started when I was a young boy, actually, at 6 years old, so it's been an odyssey that's kind of continued for about 54 years, and yes, that makes me, I'll let you figure out the answer. In any event, over the last several years, I've added another creative endeavor to what I do. It's kind of an addendum to my musical experiences, and that's a visual digital artist. Now, with the advent of all this kind of advanced computer-generated technology and the numerous art apps that you can get on the internet, I became fascinated with the possibility of expressing myself creatively with this digital medium and digital art. And I began creating this on my iPhone 4S. And now I have an iPhone 6, and an iPad. So things, as I started doing this, began to unfold before my very eyes, and I found that I was intrigued by it, I was passionate about it, I was very curious about it, I found it challenging, so the odyssey began. Believe it or not, I began drawing with one app. And I draw with my index finger, a very powerful finger, by the way. And now I have progressed into using up to 14 different apps when I create my art in varying combinations. Now, during the creative process, first and foremost, I think like a jazz musician. I think I have a different aesthetic than a lot of people. You know, it's a different artistic medium. However, when I initially begin my artwork, my visual art, I start with jazz improvisation. I'm improvising. Now, in the musical idiom, what's happening is you're spontaneously creating an improvised solo on the basic harmony and the melody and the rhythm of a piece of music. So essentially, I'm doing a similar thing with art, and I begin drawing in a kind of a free-form manner, and what happens is I start to see a visual image emerge, something that appeals to me. And much like a song that's being created, I start thinking more like a composer. I kind of switch into composer mode of what I've been doing for many, many years. Just like I hear the song progress when I'm writing music, I can actually hear it in my head and at the piano where I do most of my composing. As I see and hear that, as I hear that evolve, it's a similar concept with visual art. I start to see it change and progress. Now I see the curvilinear lines kind of unfold, and I also see the colors start to emerge, as I'll talk about in a second. I'm editing them. I'm editing the artwork as I'm doing this. I'm arranging it. So there's definitely a very serious musical aesthetic that is happening in this process. In essence, what's happening is there's a very direct correlation between my jazz music aesthetic and my visual art. And as I tend to think, music really is my art form. That's what I've been doing for the entirety of my life. But visual art is just another manifestation of my musical expression. That's how I am perceiving it. I do have artistic inspirations. Like I have many musical inspirations, and within the jazz realm. Miles Davis and Duke Ellington and Glenn Miller and Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea, and the list goes on. But as a visual artist, I was initially inspired by the works of Mondrian, who was a Dutch painter, lived from 1872 to 1944, and he was associated with this art group called the De Stijl movement, and with this group. And what that was is really a radical reduction in the composition of art. And these non-representational forms of art that was initiated by his group and by himself was called neoplasticism, if you're intrigued by that. Now what that is essentially is you take a white ground or background, okay, forming a grid of sorts, and then you apply vertical and horizontal black lines to this, okay, and what results is this interlocking series of rectangles and squares by their border. So it's pretty fascinating. I like the symmetry of this look, and I apply that to a lot of my artwork, and then infused with this are primary colors of yellow, red, and blue, kind of to capture Mondrian's intent as an artist. So initially, he was very intriguing to me. I liked the elegance of it. With the colors, I liked the symmetry, as I mentioned. I should also say that, interestingly, Mondrian was a very, very, very intense lover of jazz music. Something that's a curiosity. And he named some of his pieces with various style periods of jazz, such as something called, one of his prominent pieces was Broadway Boogie Woogie, which is a big style of jazz. That was created just prior to his death in '44, like in '42 and '43, and that's at the Museum of Modern Art now. So, one of my other influences is a sculptor by the name of Alexander Calder, who was an American painter and sculptor. And he was known initially, he kind of made his emergence in art, creating these suspended sculptures, which were referred to as mobiles, okay? And they could be, there was kinetic movement within these sculptures via a motor or air currents. Now, when we go to about 1930, here's a connection. Just like there are many connections in music, there are connections in art, in the art world. He goes and visits Mondrian's studio. And what does he discover? He discovers abstract art. And he is fascinated by it. And it kind of, inspires him again, like these things inspired me, and I'm not comparing myself to Alexander Calder, but he was inspired by it, he was challenged, and it changed his perspective. From that perspective, as his art changed and evolved, he started creating monolithic, very monumental, static, stable structures. And they were called stabiles. Now, why I like those is because they have a lot of abstract shape, angularity, and I found myself being again, challenged by this. And the more I thought about it, with my black and white type of art, that series, which you will see in the back if you go back there, a lot of my shapes could be construed as similar in scope. I'm interested in the curvilinear aspect of it, and so he was an inspiration to me. Now, when we talk about my art, I do like a lot of curvilinear shapes, and I like them kind of coalescing and intersecting with straight lines in varying degrees of angles. Again, if you look at those back painting or those back digital works, you will see some of those curvilinear shapes. Some of them have more straight lines that are intersecting with it. And its companion piece back there, which is called Metamorphosis, also has a similarity in scope to that. So that was something that I borrowed conceptually from an artist such as Calder. Now, if you look at a fair number of my artwork, there are several pieces in that hall down there. And there's one particularly back there against this other wall that are infused with lots of color. I mean, vibrant, striking colors. And if you notice, most of my artwork today is done in grids, okay, or triptychs of sorts. And the aspect of color is something that I'm innately attracted to. It's not just relegated to the art idiom or medium, but I like it in my garden, and my wife is a brilliant garden person, or at least very good.
Hardworking, at least.
Yeah. So I like color in gardens. I like color in fashion, in jewelry, and I'm always evaluating it, and I'm intrigued by it. And if I see something, I go, ah, there is something magical in this combination of colors. So as I experiment with the color spectrum, some of it actually may be construed as atypical, but I am fascinated by the creation of some of these colors. So I would say that is something that I'm always looking for. I'm just intrigued by what combinations of colors can I generate. Now, because I am working in the digital idiom, I have a lot of digital effects that are infused within my artwork of varying styles and degrees. My fellow artist here, Alex, mentioned something very pertinent to what I think about, is even though you use effects, you don't want to invalidate the integrity of the work. It has to make sense. You know, just like a piece of music, however you're, creating it, you don't want to lose the essence of the song. You don't want to put something into it that sounds artificial, like too many strings, for instance, in a really lovely piece of music. You just don't want to invalidate it. So I do enjoy that, and I'm mindful of it when I'm creating. A lot of the pieces, well, the pieces over here for sure, I'm thinking about the vertical aspect of the line. Now, like I was talking about with Mondrian, there's a lot of verticality in his grid work. The thing that I do in my own way is I modify the vertical component such that the interior and exterior is more abstract. And I am, in fact, an abstract digital artist. I mean, that's how I describe my work. Okay, but it'll range in degrees of abstraction from the interior and the exterior, and that's kind of fascinating because it's a variation, and I'll talk about that in a second. And if you look at that paint or that digital work over there, it's called Menagerie. What that is a collection of animals, all sorts of things, cats and a toucan, and snakes, and a pink bear, and flamingos, all sorts of things. I kind of wanted you to get an overview. Now, they are available for sale in individual pieces, but I wanted you to see kind of a collection of those things. And why I like this, and I also do caricatures of people, is because I think that art should be fun. Color is kind of a magnetic appeal, kind of a visceral appeal to people. And I think with my animals and how I'm manipulating them and creating them, there's kind of an impish quality to it. I'm trying to capture their innate personality, okay? And that kind of describes that. Now, why I chose these particular works, I think they typify the kind of work I'm doing right now. I wanted to give you a good overview of what I'm trying to say artistically within the visual medium, and to better understand the correlation between my musical sensibilities and my visual art. Now, the back piece, the black and white, which I hope you will go back and take a look at if you haven't already, the title of that is Hieroglyphics. And basically, the symbols of this that are in every individual little component, every little mini grid, depict the meaning of words within a culture, a civilization. So imagine yourself, if you look at it, going back thousands of years, and you're in the Egyptian civilization, for instance, and you're trying to figure out what these hieroglyphs may mean to the people of that civilization. Now, granted, those are less obvious. They're far more abstract, yet use your own creativity, like I'm fond of doing with my visual art and my music, and see if some of those resonate with you in a certain way, if you can discern what some of those symbols may mean. That could be true in the Incan Empire or the Aztec or the Mayan Empire. In some of these hieroglyphs you would find on temple walls, on public monuments, in caves, things of that nature. And now its companion part over there, metamorphosis. Now things have been modified. They've been transformed from one generation to maybe another generation, or 2 generations, or 3 generations. There's a retention of those hieroglyphs, but they're not the same exactly. I've assembled, each of these and put, the red portion, the red color into it. So just like our language changes over time, our symbology changes, so do these hieroglyphs. So I found that kind of fascinating. I should mention that the black and white piece I spent about 6 months doing, all those individual things. When you work in the digital medium in black and white, the black portion is very challenging because there are innate little minuscule streakings within the blackness of it. Okay? So what you have to do is very meticulously color in with your digital finger, as it were, and clean up those streaks. Now, imagine with any little symbol back there, there might be 5 to 10 imperfections. So in order to clean that up within a curvilinear line is an exercise in frustration many times, in tedium. You really have to be meticulous, and you have to really want to do it, okay? But because you can essentially erase very quickly when you're doing digital art, it's not like it's a laborious process. It's pretty instantaneous, and when I do this, I'm pretty fast. I can after I've done so many of these, the process goes quickly. However, the actual execution of it can be quite lengthy, and it has to be pristine because I don't want anything to not be clean and elegant. So that's why it took so long, not just to create them, but to clean them up, to make them elegant. Okay? So when you look at it, maybe you're thinking it looks like calligraphy. And that's what I was shooting for. Like Alex did, I go to Hamilton Color Labs as well, and they do a phenomenal job. In the digital idiom, or any medium, it has to be, the colors, they have to be just, the clarity has to be extraordinary. Otherwise, you look at it and you think, you're disappointed. There's kind of a visceral feel like, oh, it's just not clean enough. There's imperfections in it. So let's just say, like with my music, I'm pretty fussy with the way I arrange music, the way it's performed, the orchestration of it, the actual recording of it. So that aesthetic is carried through. I should say now, because Rachel will probably mention the prices, they're not terribly inexpensive, but by the time I put this time in and try to make it look extraordinarily clean and interesting for you, I'm charging around $450 for these. And with the time involved, and hopefully if you are interested, or if you know somebody else that's interested, it's a beautiful piece of work in a relatively new emerging medium for art. There are, of course, digital artists, but just like music has evolved from analog, where you actually had to use tape and splice tape, now music is really predominantly digital. And with all these music software programs, it's virtually instantaneous. The people, the recording engineers that do that are remarkably fast. Okay? It's quite an interesting experience to do art that way. Now, I wanted to mention another piece against the wall, theme and variations. What did I mean by theme and variations? Well, in music, form determines how music is organized. It's a style of, it's a bona fide musical style, and then form determines how it's all organized. So if you start with a primary theme in music, like a main melody, and then you undergo a series of variations in perhaps very altered forms, and those themes can reemerge. And if you look at that artwork, you will see the initial one on the far left was the symbol, was the work that started it all. And then I transformed it. And interestingly, it's in grid form, but it's like a grid within a grid. As you look at it, there's different shapes within the color. The colors are fairly static. I mean, they're static, but the arrangement is modified, okay? So it's grids within grids, and that intrigued me. How can you make this interesting? How can you reinvent yourself? Just like in music, for those of you that study or listen to music, you're not maybe always aware of music that's theme and variations. You hear it, but maybe you don't understand it to the degree. One of my favorite ones, and one of my favorite composers, is Bach. And one of the most glorious pieces for keyboard is actually the Goldberg Variations, done by a phenomenal keyboardist named Glenn Gould. And there's about 20 variations, and they are exquisite. So I was trying to bring that concept to that piece. Now, as I mentioned, with the triptychs over here, if you take a look at them, they're very colorful. One is called American Waters, and you see the movement within each triptych. It progresses again from relatively simple movement, and then it goes to more radical movement. And they're all very colorful. So, that hopefully this has given you kind of an idea of how I'm creating my art. It's progressed significantly from when I started in its infancy form. It's hard to imagine that you can maybe generate art on an iPhone or an iPad. It's pretty remarkable, actually. We now live in a digital age. It's not going to become less digital. I promise you that. It's only going to grow exponentially. For those of you that do these things and have iPhones, etc., with your computers, you've probably seen the evolution of all the possibilities over the last X number of years. This is true in art. This is true in music. So, because I'm embracing this, I'm intrigued by it, and hopefully I'm doing something, well, I know I'm doing something that is appealing to me, and hopefully you will enjoy it as well. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions before I conclude my talk?
Do you listen to jazz while you do it? No. Only in his head.
Actually, that is a very good question, and Beth is pretty much right. I do tend to hear it in my head, and I'm bringing that mindset to it. Sometimes if I hear the music, actually acoustically, it's a bit distracting. I need the concentration, because when you're so in tune with music and listening to music, it can be, my mind then shifts into, another realm, as it were. So I kind of need quiet, and night after night, day after day, you do this, intricate little minuscule work. So just like you compose and arrange, that's kind of how it evolves. It's kind of a fascinating process.
I have a related question. I think this is called sounds.
Sound waves.
Sound waves. Yeah, so my question is, how does this relate to sound waves?
Okay. First, you should understand that this piece did not start anything like this. It started in a labyrinth of color, like an infusion of multiple colors. And then, after this kind of, you know, circular style of composing, then I made it into a semicircle. And then I put it through another app that elongated it. And then the colors from a density of, a ball-like shape started to emerge in a whole different configuration. So, sound waves. Do you see the movement of the lines? A lot of my art has movement in it. So, the sound wave is oscillating at a certain frequency here. That might be smooth jazz, which I write, or contemporary jazz. This one, now we're entering the realm more of rock. Some kind of dimension. It's creating a more intense, abstract sound wave, you know, oscillating at a different frequency. Finally, we get to heavy metal. Now it's really become more abstract, and you have to have a discerning ear to maybe appreciate that on the level that I was conceiving it. So there's an evolution from smoother sound waves to more abstract and more intense music that may be more strident, for instance, in concept. That is how I created sound waves. But it didn't look like this when I started. It was circular. Then it was semicircular. And then I used another app to stretch it. And then the colors appeared in a different configuration. That's kind of that's what intrigues me. There's a metamorphosis, again, of how these colors are arranged.
So when you say circular, do you mean like the surface was
circular
this way? Or?
Right. I mean, the color spectrum. It was a word that was circular, that I designed it in a circular format. And then I had an app that turned it into a semicircle. Okay, so it's starting like a block of color. A block of color, like you're molding it. And then this other app turned it into a semicircle. And then yet another app stretched it. So now the colors had a different configuration. Does that answer your question, more or less?
So did the idea of this depicting sound waves, did that come later? Or did it start out looking at...
It didn't start as sound waves, but it evolved into sound waves. And then as I saw it, kind of progress, I thought, this is kind of reminiscent of what a sound wave or sound waves would look like. Although very colorfully so, in more of an abstract form. So that's how this particular piece came about.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions? Again, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And thank you, Skip and Rachel. Appreciate it.